And then I went to my therapist and I said, I was going to tell this story. And she's like, this is we're coming to understand now that the underlying cause of eating disorder is OCD.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then I was like, my mom was definitely OCD.
Really?
Which I've always joked about for years and years and years.
Right.
Right. My mom was the kind of person who, she'd vacuum and it had to be completely, it had to look, and so she's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, you couldn't have said this to me earlier. Do you know what I mean? And then she's like, we also now are understanding that dyslexia, ADHD, AD, OCD, bipolar are considered neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
So people who fall into those categories, you would now, autism spectrum, you would actually now consider neurodivergent.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is a much sexier thing to say than OCD.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I think it's all about, where the titles and when the titles come from, because neurodivergent sounds sexier because it includes like a whole bunch of like current culture,
yes, exactly.
subtext.
Exactly.
Whereas OCD includes older subtext, which is to say you're something's wrong with you.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Whereas,
and OCD does not just present itself. When we think of OCD, we just think about it like the people who are tapping and opening and closing doors, and it doesn't only involve that.
Right.
It is the obsessive part.
Right.
Is a part,
well, people,
the compulsion.
People know the compulsion part.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they don't know the obsessive part.
Right.
And the young girl who told the story, she was like, unless you have lived in a eating disorder brain, you don't really know what that means. And I'm like, yes, that's true. I don't struggle with that how I used to.
Yeah.
Like when I was going through it.
Yeah.
When she said that, I was like, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
There's like, it's like your brain is just like buffering.
Mm-hmm.
It just gets on a thought and then about a particular food or a particular, and I do that in other ways, but now I do it around acting or
your brain buffers.
I brain buffer around other things, right?
Can you explain that? Like, what do you mean by buffering?
Well, I just get on a thought, right? And sometimes it could be a personal thing, but sometimes it can be a work thing or an acting thing, right? And so the thought will come in, and then it just, how the little wheel on the is just doing that. The thought is just going, right? And then I can't get off the thought.
Do you find that does that help you as a director?
In some ways it does.
Explain that.
In some weird way it does.
Yeah. How?
Because I'm recognizing like, and usually it's like something that I like what you said about forgiveness, right? You're like, I need to know you said something very specific. I need to know the lesson. So if I'm buffering on something when I'm directing, I'm like, that's not working, that's not working, that's not working, that's not working, right? And so I spin on it. So until I can, and usually what has to happen is I have to come back into my body. So I go for a walk, or I take a shower, or right? Usually that will get me out of the spin. So the spin is often a clue.
A clue that you're buffering.
Yeah.
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 That's interesting. So you've developed over time, it sounds like you've developed your own kind of, what do you call it? Like mechanisms, right? Or that coping, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
With like Because does it when you get that buffer, does it feel uncomfortable?
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it's like excruciating,
Yeah.
but sometimes it feels normal.
What do you mean by that?
Just because I've done it for so long.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
But that's been this has only been in the last couple of months where I've had kind of this understanding of that mechanism in my brain and thinking about it as a neurological. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not alone. I know lots of people.
It's more approachable that way.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, normal. That's why I asked you about normal, because, I wasn't sure if you meant normal personally, which is obviously what you meant as you describe it, but it's also just kind of normal. Like a lot of people experience buffering or some version of that.
Yes.
And I find that, it seems like, how we cope with it, I think, is very illustrative of like how the sort of the life paths that we end up choosing.
Yes, I think so.
Right. I mean, a lot of people end up doing theater and acting and storytelling in general because of the ways that they feel abnormal.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Is that what it was like for you when you got involved?
Yes.
You just felt different somewhere?
Well, and you were just speaking to that too, right? You were saying when you got to theater, you were like, oh, these brains work the way my brain works, right? These are my people.
Yeah, my tribe.
This is my tribe, right? These are the people who also, their brains also. I think a lot of people were drawn towards theater because we do have those worlds inside of us, right? That we're trying to express. And theater, acting, film is a safe way to express those things, right? Like we just have a need to express. And so this is the way we can do it in a safe way.
Is that something that you knew early on when you got involved, or is that something you've discovered?
I think that's something I've discovered. And I remember somebody saying that to me, maybe in my 30s. You have a need, and it might have been a therapist. You have a need to express. Oh, yes, I do. I do. I have a need to express what is happening inside of me, and this is the way that I have found. So interestingly enough, so kind of going back to the OCD, right? Interestingly enough, when I'm in an acting class, when I'm teaching acting, when I'm directing, I do not experience that. I do not experience the buffering. I do not experience the, those are the places where I feel most present and most in my body and those are safe places. Right. For me to be in that. And which is, I think, also why, I've made a career out of doing this, because it's the safest place to do that.
To be yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't be us at our most, the Meisner expanded activity, you at your most. That's not really allowed in the real world.
No, it's not. And in a lot of our minds, it's not even allowed in that room.
Yes, exactly.
That's a hurdle for probably everyone who goes through that work.
I would agree.
Yeah.
But once you break through that ceiling, oh, it's so delicious. It's just amazing, right? It's so freeing and alive, and just kind of gives you a glimpse of what it feels like to live that way,
What drew you to Meisner in the first place?
So if I'm honest, I graduated. So I graduated from an undergrad program that was heavy on going to grad school. Like that was expected of us. We were essentially told, you will go to grad school, right? And I tried to get into professional actor training program, and I didn't make it. I was rejected. Nobody really knew what to do with me when I was that age. I'm a tall woman. They were like, are you a leading lady? Are you a character? A couple of times I even played an ingenue.
I was going to say, and there was already one Sigourney Weaver.
Right. And there was already a Sigourney Weaver. Exactly. So I don't think anybody really knew what to do with me. So I not really because I wanted to, but because I didn't get accepted, I had a year away, and then I decided that I would really like to try my hand at directing. I'd always been more interested in the bigger picture. So I think you know this part of my story. Then I went to the University of Montana, and I studied directing there, and that was such a gift for me because I got to do all sorts of things. I directed, I still acted. I was involved in some like weird ass theater while I was there, like some of the weirdest things I've ever done before or since, right? That were just like amazing. And I wrote a 2-woman show with another woman, and I toured that around a bit. And then after grad school, I decided to move to New York, and all of my friends, I'm telling you, everybody I came in contact with was like, Meisner work.
What do you think?
We're doing the Meisner work.
What
the fuck is the Meisner work, right?
Yeah.
So some of my best friends were doing it at Rutgers with William Esper and Maggie Flanagan. And then a friend of mine from school, who ended up being my husband, he was doing it at the William Esper studio in New York City. So I just felt like it was like everybody was talking about it, right? Yeah. And very passionate about it, and obviously very moved by it, affected by it. And so really, I just wanted to be a part of the conversation.
Right.
And so I went to the William Esper studio, and I had an interview with William Esper, and he put me in Maggie's class. Thank God.
Why do you say that?
I know that a lot of people really loved Bill as a teacher as well, but Maggie was like, she was really the first female teacher I had.
Wow. In
my entire theater trajectory, both undergrad and grad school. She was the first female teacher I had. And
that was Bill's suggestion.
And yeah.
Did you ever learn why?
Well, and I also knew that my friends, like my friends were studying with Maggie as well.
Right.
And Mike was studying, my friend who became my husband. He was also studying with Maggie. So I had been hearing a lot about Maggie. So I was like, okay, great. And so I remember even in that, I did the summer, I dipped my toe in, and I just did the summer session. And I just remember going, I just had such a feeling of, and you've heard me say this before, I just had such a feeling of home. I really did. It was like she was giving me a vocabulary for something that I already instinctively knew. Like I had an instinct that this is what acting could be. And then she was confirming that for me.
Yeah.
And then she was showing me the path to it. And then she was also giving me the language for it. And it was life changing. And I feel like too, it came at the right time for me. Like, I don't know if it would have been good for me to go through grad school doing that. I needed all those other experiences in grad school.
What were you doing in grad school that was
So
different?
I was directing, and I was directing like main stage productions. I did a lot of writing when I was in grad school. I wrote a couple of plays. I wrote a theater education play. I wrote this 2-woman show with this other woman. I was teaching, so I kind of had my hands in everything, and that was really good for me. Having that.
Yeah.
Hello, guy.
Totally. That, by the way, is Meisner training, isn't it?
Yes.
Just recognize what it is.
There it is.
You hear that, guy?
Hear that in the moment.
Sure do.
Hello, garbage man. So, yeah, for whatever reason, that needed to be my own particular path.
Yeah.
I needed to have that before I could get to the Meisner work.
So you mentioned like you felt like you had an instinct for the conversation that was taking place as you started to learn what was going on. Mm-hmm. Do you think that being able to focus on it affected the trajectory of your teaching career or directing career? Yeah, for
sure. I think both. For the first time, I felt like I had something more solid underneath me, right? Whereas all of my training up to that point had been like a hodgepodge of different ideas, different teachers, right? Kind of putting them all in my toolbox. But then the Meisner work gave me this like solid foundation and a very specific way of working, of thinking like an actor and a director. For me, it was the right path. For somebody else, it maybe would be the opposite, right? They would have found the Meisner work first and then found their way to these other things. But that's just happened to be my trajectory. And yeah, that worked for me.
It seems to be still working for you.
Yeah. And then, honestly, Mike and I, my husband and I, lived in New York City on September 11th. And after that happened, we were both like, maybe we want to live someplace else. Maybe it's time to, see other parts of the country. And, LA seems like the next obvious choice. Yeah. And then we were like, do we really want to go to LA? Maybe we go LA adjacent. Right. Maybe we go to San Diego. And San Diego has a thriving theater scene. We have the Globe, we have the Playhouse, lots of local theaters here. And we came and checked it out, and we were excited and encouraged, and we knew we wanted to be in a place where we could still continue to be challenged by the community that we were in. And so 2 years after September 11th, we moved here. And then we were probably about 5 years in. Okay, so I'm going to be really honest right now. You can edit this or not. I heard myself complaining a lot.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard myself complaining a lot about the acting that I was seeing.
Yeah.
And I was just bitching a lot.
Yeah. I can relate.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't like that feeling. I don't want to be somebody who just sits around and complains. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that I'm complaining about? And what is it that I feel is missing here? And of course, I couldn't help but go back to my experience in New York, right? My experience in Maggie's class, my experience with not all New York theater is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny.
Not all New York theater is,
yeah.
just because you're
in New York,
doesn't mean that, right?
For sure.
But Maggie's voice and Maggie's standard and Maggie's rigor and Maggie's aesthetic, right, was always like talking to me in the back of my mind. So I was like, what if I taught this work? What if I taught this work? Like, oh, shit, can I do that? I don't know. I'm kind of scared. Could I really do that? Because I felt like I would have, having Maggie as my teacher would, that's such a high bar.
Yeah.
It's a very, very high bar. And so I had the opportunity to teach at a conservatory during the summer. And the woman asked me, what do you want to teach? I said, I want to teach the Meisner work. Okay.
So you sort of
I'm
just
going to do this.
Yeah. Just put it
Fuck it. I'm just going to do it. Right?
Yeah.
So my first summer, God bless those students. God bless you. I was just trying to, just figure it out.
Yeah.
And I had gone back to my notes and I had meticulously gone over my notes and everything that I had remembered about, class. And I talked to a lot of my peers, who had also gone through the Meisner work. And I just kind of went for it. And after that first summer of doing it, I was like, oh God, this is it. This is it.
What is it? What do you mean?
I want to do this.
So for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to teach this.
And what do you think it was that happened that gave you that thought?
It reminded me, right, about all of the things that so by this time I had been about 7 or 8 years out of Maggie's class.
Mm-hmm. That seems like a magic number.
Yeah, right?
7,
yes.
About 7 years.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. I know that for other people too, that 7 years out was the number where they were like, oh, I think I get it.
Yeah.
So, Meisner says it takes 20 years to be a really good actor. So
right.
I was about 7 years out of class, and I was just like, okay, instead of complaining, instead of bitching about what you're not seeing, what if you started to put your energy towards like what Maggie was teaching you? Like, what do you want to see? What do you value in acting and in actors and in, and everything I value about acting and what I value about good acting and what I admire about good actors finds its way back to the principles of the Meisner work.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
For me. And I know that it's not like that for some people.
Sure.
So that first summer of doing that was really my, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and teach this. And then I just started trying to put classes together. I just started this is before Facebook
right.
So I just was like
bulletin boards,
every place I could possibly try and teach it. I was trying to teach it. I just started emailing a bunch of people that I knew, you know what I mean? And okay, I'm going to try and do this. And, my first Meisner class that I had, I was teaching it at New Village Arts, and I had about 10 people, and they were mostly middle-aged women. It was great. And God bless those people too. God bless them. They stuck with me. They stuck through the whole 2-year process with me.
You find that to be unusual?
That they were sticking with me?
Do people usually stick through the 2 years? Yeah.
no, they don't. So I think in part it was because these people were committed to each other.
Yeah. The
Do you
community
know?
aspect.
The
Yeah.
community was committed to each other.
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, fuck it. What else are we going to do on Tuesday night? You know?
That
So
is my
we might as
Tuesday.
well
Yeah.
like come and like hang out with Lisa and these other people. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot in those 2 years, you know, because the good thing about teaching middle-aged women is they will also tell you exactly what you're doing that is working
Yeah.
and exactly what you're doing that is not working. So I learned a lot from them very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I just tried to continue to find people who would just come and hang out with me
Yeah.
and let me teach them this thing that I love so much, you know.
And that was 2008-ish
Okay, so
or something?
let's see. That would have been, yes, it would have been
About 2008.
about 2008.
What is it about the principles, you know, and the things that you say you value so much about the work that makes you think that it's a good fit for addressing, for lack of a better way of putting it, you know, a quality or a standard in a local acting community that can, you know, essentially raise the bar?
I think the biggest thing that Meisner, well, not there are several things, of course, that I think the Meisner work can do for you as an actor. What it means to really listen and really respond is, of course, one of the most important things that it teaches you, right? What it means to really be affected by another person, really let them land on you. What it means to be moved, right, by another human being. I think it gives you that. I think it gives you access to your imagination in a way that other techniques don't, right? And it gives you access to your imagination through your emotional life, right? So, as you know, one of the big things you do in the first year work is you work on you. You find yourself in the work.
Mm-hmm.
You start to find what taps you, what lights up you, what has meaning to you. And that's one of the most valuable things I think you can have as an actor.
Yeah.
You know, well, what lights me up?
Yeah.
Right? And then from there, you begin to then put yourself in imaginary circumstances that have those seeds of truth and then live from that place.
Yeah.
Right? Which is essentially what you do in a play
Yeah.
or in a movie, on television, right? What are the given circumstances? How does that connect to me? How do I understand it? Where do I feel that in my body? Okay, so then yes, then what am I here to do?
Right.
Right? And then let me come into this scene with my scene partner and be a feather in the wind and really listen and really respond and allow myself to be in the moment with my partner. And of course, that sounds very,
Elusive, maybe?
Elusive,
Yeah.
yes. But I think that the technique takes you through and strengthens the muscles that you need to do exactly that, right?
Yeah.
As you know, from going through the work, you know, each muscle that you build with each exercise is just building on the last muscle, right?
Yeah. cumulative in that
It's
way. Yeah.
cumulative.
And it's a tough one, right?
Yes.
I just realized that saying it.
Cumulative. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I find really useful about it, or fascinating, I guess, in a way, is and it's like, I remember going through the work. I've now done it essentially 1.5 times.
Mhm.
And I've gone through watching the work happen as your shadow for 18 months, roughly, what it was like maybe a year straight. And then
Yeah.
like that 6 months I came sort of sporadically before that. So I've seen it a bunch of times, right? Going through the
Yes, right.
process a bunch of times. And what I find really useful about it also is its almost ubiquitous application, right? Like it seems to me that it was designed or developed certainly during like a stage theater time in
Yeah, yeah.
America, right? It was like
Yeah.
right after Strasberg, right after Adler. You know, I actually, you had me read The Fervent Years.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't think we ever talked about it.
Yes.
But I
I was
picture,
like, how have they not made a movie out of that book?
first of all, right? First of all, it's so
much
dramatic.
drama.
Yeah, totally.
So much drama.
So I picture, like, you know, Stella coming back from France or whatever it was when she met, you know, Stanislavski. Like just furious, like standing on a table, like screaming at Lee, like, you're a fucking idiot, you know, just being so mad, and like, you know, whatever, and him just defending his whole position, and little Sandy Meisner just like watching all of this happen in front of him. He's not really written about in the book, just a little couple of things here and there. And what I imagine is he's watching all of it going, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's her ego. That's his ego.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And going, I would do this. This is what I would do.
Yes.
I feel like he developed that thing from the time he was doing the group theater, and just
for
right,
sure.
and then eventually.
For sure.
So anyway, what I find interesting about it is that even though it grew up in that time, his technique grew up in that time. It's something that, you know, you mentioned being a feather in the wind and really listening to your partner and really being there with somebody. It's so useful when you're doing take after take after take on screen.
Right.
Have you, in your experience, like, can you speak to that, like, through either your own experience, Mike's experience, or your students' experience as people who've crossed over, you know, theater and screen boundaries?
Yeah, kind of, you know, so the whole idea of being a feather in the wind, right? I like that you're saying that you can apply it to both. Yes, it exists in theater, but it's especially effective for film. You know, if you're having to do take after take after take, in part, I would imagine, having never been on a movie set, that I would imagine you're doing that because the director is looking for every possible nuance.
Yeah.
Right, that they can find in that one particular take.
Sure.
And so you are not the same moment to moment, right? So what you are doing is not going to be the same,
right,
moment to moment. In this particular take, right, maybe you're feeling more alive around a particular word or moment or thought, right? But then in the next take, it's not there in that exact way. Right. And there's another moment that is bubbling more to the surface. Right. And of course, all of that has to do with your preparation.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
You prepare, and then you put it in your back pocket, and then you let it all go, and then you come into the space.
I think that's
and
what
you work
takes
off of
what's happening, right? I think that's what takes 7 years.
Yes, I think you're right.
Right? It's trusting that there's less to do than you think there is, because you know what to do to prepare.
Yes.
That, right? Like, it's like you, and part of what you do to prepare is all the stuff that you've mentioned, at least in the first year work, of getting to know what lights you up so much.
Right.
Because those are the doorways in, right, to each scenario, each character, each, you know, emotional preparation.
Right.
How do I imagine this thing would go if I were the one that were there? It's just you.
I understand this?
Yeah.
Where does this live in me?
Yeah.
Right. Not where does this live in me?
Right. No.
Where does this live in me? Right. most acting technique, I think, is trying to get you to that.
Yeah.
Right. It's just everybody has a different way
Yeah.
of getting there,
Yeah.
and Meisner's particular way is, right, understand it in you first, right? Listen, respond,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And then, when you find that you're, as a Meisner trained actor, and you're faced with somebody who's not,
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting
It
thing, right?
is.
Because you spend a lot of time developing your community, right? And how
Yes.
you do this work. And it's so communal, it's so tribal, it's so, right, trusting and taking risks and all of this and communicating about it and sharing your experience with it, that when you're faced with somebody who doesn't do that, or it has just a different way of doing it, it can be kind of jarring.
Yeah.
Again, what
Yeah.
possibly could contribute to the 7-year penny drop. But I do also find, in my experience, that like it just, the technique itself prepares you, for any of that.
Yeah.
Like you can apply the technique in the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can apply it in the work that you're doing personally. You can apply it to the work that you're doing on set with somebody who's not a Meisner trained actor, or God forbid, someone who's completely untrained,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which sometimes as a commercial actor you got to do, right? So, I find that really, really just useful and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You just end up dealing with what is.
Mm-hmm. Again, if I'm honest, I often, as a director, when I'm auditioning people, I actually want to hear how. I'll watch the audition, right? Auditioning is a skill in and of itself.
Thank you for saying that. I totally
Right?
agree.
It's like, that's a whole different skill, and you need to go and get trained and learn how to do that. That's one set of muscles you need to learn how to build and what to do with them, right?
Right.
And then doing a play or being on set is a whole different set of muscles, right? So whenever I'm auditioning for something, for better or for worse, I always like to ask the actors after, like this last project I did, I was having a particularly hard time casting this one role. And with every actor who came in, I asked them, like, well, how do you understand this? I really wanted to hear, like, how the actor, how the character was living inside of this particular actor, right? And I will tell you, there were a couple of people that I was really interested in. But when I asked them that question, okay, I know as a director, my job is to interpret whatever language this actor is speaking.
Right.
And then try and speak back, right, to the best of my ability, right, their particular language, right? But there were a few people that I was like, yeah, have a good day.
Just never ending when you shoot outside.
There were a few people, though, in the audition that I was like, I don't understand that language at all.
Yeah.
Like this would be a hard match because I don't understand this language. And in retrospect, I would say to you that language was usually more from a place of intellect,
right,
or theorizing,
right,
or trying to solve it from a head place,
right.
And I want to hear an actor who's solving it from a heart place.
And where does that distinction for you come from? Why is that important?
So I always know when that's happening, because if an actor says something that is from a heart place, I feel it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, oh, yes. And sometimes, often, actors will say things that I didn't even like. I didn't think about that. Or that didn't occur to me.
Yeah.
Right? I always love that. I love that. I love when an actor will say something to me that about a character or a story, or that it 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 didn't occur to me that way, right? And it's when that happens, it inevitably comes from a feeling place,
Yeah.
not from a headspace, right? So so it's mostly just a feeling, that I have. If it's an actor who's reflecting back to me something more from a headspace, then I know my job as a director is going to be get you out of your head
Right.
and into your body,
Right.
right? And that can be a very hard road,
Yeah.
and
It was for me.
mhm,
You watched me do it.
mhm.
I don't know that you ever saw me get to the other side, but
Oh, I think I did.
maybe
I think I
once or
did.
twice.
I think I
I
did.
can relate to that road.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a very difficult road.
Yeah.
And I think that, can you speak then to, how training in that way might help someone? Right? Like, do you
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it takes training, or does it
Yes.
take life experience?
I
Okay.
think it takes training.
Yeah.
I think you have to train yourself to do that. I think you have to train yourself to move it into a personal place, an alive place, a place that has freedom. And yes, I think it takes training,
Hmm.
because I think it's natural for us to, right?
Sure. Intellectualize, or yeah.
You know,
But I guess maybe the question, maybe it's just a two-parter then. What's the difference when you see an actor performing from a headspace versus a heart space? And why do you prefer, one
well,
over
and
the
I
other?
would ask you that same question because you've seen that as well.
All right, Socrates.
Right?
Yeah.
You've seen that as well.
Yeah.
For me, when a person is fully embodied, right? When an actor is fully embodied, it fills up the space. It radiates.
Yeah.
It's, to take Chekhov language, right? You feel it. It's alive. It's living. It's breathing. It's right.
It's why we go.
It's why we go. It's what we want to see.
Yeah. That's actually maybe my favorite cookie that you ever drop for somebody, is that I would pay money for that.
Mm-hmm.
Which, it's funny. I remember we did a workshop together recently in LA where you said that once or twice. And it must have been afterwards. I was talking to somebody about it, and they were like, "Oh, that just sort of cheapens the whole thing." Like it somehow they felt like they were prostituted.
I
for
know.
the moment.
I've also had other people say that to me when I've said that.
Which I find fascinating when
Yeah.
you think about it, because it's like, well, like, isn't that what we're doing?
That is what we're doing.
Like,
You want to get paid to do this.
absolutely.
You want to be paid to do this.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yes.
We don't want to just do this in class.
Right. Pay to do this.
You want
right.
to get paid to do that.
Right.
Right?
But I find that it's just interesting pushback. And I think maybe that has to do with, you get to a place where the work becomes so personal.
Yeah.
That, you have to then draw the line again at some point.
Yeah.
Back to the professional.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's another road.
Yeah.
Which is really an interesting, I don't find that there's a lot of support for that. You're kind of on your own to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yes. And to be, if I'm being honest, that's part of what I want to do. Mm-hmm. Because I've had a hard time with that. I've had a hard time getting to a place of going like, well, how do I apply all of this to a business that I'm growing?
Yes.
Right. Ultimately.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to do that. So, that's the reason I became a creative person, was to leave that life behind.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. But there's not a lot, of resources to figure that part out. And to me, the community aspect that you were talking about before, about training together, about doing work together, about having that kind of a space, really lends itself, I think, to, the potential for just holding each other up.
Yes.
To do that.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I think class can give you, what you're talking about. Class can give you that that safe space to be an artist, to express your art, to, right? But yeah, at the end of the day, you want that job.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want that job, and nobody pursues acting wanting to do it every once in a while,
Right.
right?
Right.
We
right.
all would like to have this in our. There are people, of course, who are satisfied and wanting to do it every once in a while,
Right.
and that's enough for them. But most of us
Yeah, you
that
mean
pursue it,
like Daniel Day-Lewis or something.
yeah, exactly, like Daniel
once in a while.
Day-Lewis, like him. But most of us, you know,
Yeah.
we want to get paid for what we do.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be. I don't think there should be any shame around that.
No.
It doesn't make you less of an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
To want to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
For what you do well.
I find that fascinating, right? I mean, it really is just like a coupling of two very different cultures, like storytelling and art and interpretation or interpolation, right, of the world around us is something that's been from the beginning of the cognitive revolution, right? 70,000, 35,000 years ago, right? Like that's just who we are.
Yeah.
But then, you add on top of it, what happens when we start to civilize in a different way, which is the world we live in now, right? We got bills to pay.
Yeah.
We got lives.
Yeah.
Other lives to support.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it a fascinating, discussion or challenge really, because there is a lot of like dealing with your shame, I think. To choose to choose doing this.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and then continuing on.
Yeah.
So do you think it's any coincidence that you married an actor?
No. Yeah, it's funny that you say that. Again, you can put this in or not. Mike and I are to an age now, we're middle-aged people. That's the truth. And, for the majority of our lives, we've been, the art of acting and the art of, and I still hold that value.
Yeah.
And I would like some retirement, please. Right?
Yeah.
The truth is, we need to live.
Yeah.
The truth is, San Diego's the most expensive place to live. Isn't it the country now?
Is it?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah.
So.
Well, then you should move to LA.
Right? LA will be cheaper, probably.
Strangely, it might be.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about one last thing, and I'm not quite sure how to ask it or think about it, but speaking of LA, there's a lot of people in LA who consider that they've trained up.
Mm-hmm.
So for a community of people, that, I mean, you said earlier, take this, edit it out, whatever. I'm going to be honest with you, is what you said. That you were frustrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were getting angry or frustrated or bitching about the quality of, of what you were seeing. And I mean, it's certainly not a ubiquitous, across the board observation, but I make a lot of jokes about how all the English and all the Australians are taking our jobs.
Yeah.
Right. As Americans.
Yes.
Playing Americans, right?
Yes.
You see that too?
Yes, absolutely.
It's not like I'm not making that up.
No, you're not.
And I surmise, right, that there's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's something, maybe this is the way to ask it. I think there's something about, because, in LA, people study Strasberg, people study Adler.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know the quality of those schools.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't know the schedule of those programs either.
Right.
I do know Meisner.
Right.
And I do know that there are schools in LA that either some of them claim, just like you've experienced before, and this is kind of an interesting conversation, the idea, the claim that I'm teaching, we're teaching Meisner here, but that they're
it's
really,
a hybrid of.
Yeah, or just they teach what? Repetition,
Yeah.
right? And that's it.
Right.
and they say you
Yeah.
are now Meisner trained, and
Yes.
it's total garbage, right?
Yeah.
People want badly the success of being a working actor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're willing to forego or misunderstand the work that it takes to be someone, this is a terrible word for it, but maybe deserving of that position in life.
Yeah.
Like, you don't just get it because you want it. You
Right.
don't just get it because you're attractive. You don't just get it because you're interested.
Right.
Maybe those things matter,
Yeah.
to the
This
business.
can get you through a door.
For sure. Right.
This will get you through a door.
So for people who maybe have been in LA for a while, or people that are just showing up going, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
How is it that, what makes what you're doing with Meisner specifically distinctive from, either other schools that you've experienced here or anywhere? And why choose it? Why not just go to a casting director workshop,
right,
and learn how to audition,
right,
or something simpler, something that doesn't take 2 years to get through?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. It's a good question. That's a big question.
It is.
I do think that if you want longevity, I do think that if you want you want longevity, you want diversity, you want to be able to, do you know what I mean? Like, you could spend your entire career doing one thing, playing one thing.
Right.
Most people, I think, even if you're getting paid well, at some point it's going to bore the hell out of you.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to be wanting or looking for more. I do think the actors that have longevity in our field are actors who have training, actors who know how to work, actors who know how to find their way to the deeper experience quickly, truthfully, right? I'm trying to think, like, who are some of the great actors that we love that are Meisner trained?
Well, Allison Janney.
Yeah.
Right? Sam Rockwell.
I was just thinking Sam Rockwell too. These are people who've had tremendous success.
And varied, right? The
and
characters.
Very varied, in terms of the kind of work that they've done.
Yeah.
You kind of can sense, or you see an actor who has been well trained, right? And who knows how to use, they have the craft, right? They understand the craft. They have a craft, right? As opposed to an actor who's taken a couple of workshops with a casting director and maybe gotten one or two guest roles on, because they're interesting, because of the way they look, because of that. But the people who have longevity have a technique, they have a craft, they have a way of working. They know who they are. They know how to get there. And really, when you think about 2 years of your life in the scheme of, like, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully, like, the next 20 years of you being in this field, it's not a lot of time.
Right.
Right. And the kind of foundation that you'll build for yourself in learning a technique is, this is kind of cliche, but it's priceless, right? And you're not going to get there any faster without a technique, right? So you might as well invest the time in yourself, in a technique, so that you can have that longer, bigger career that you want. Yeah. It seems obvious to me, but I know that maybe other people, they do want the quicker, faster, shorter road, right, to getting there. I'm saying take the long road. Take the long road.
It's worth it.
It's worth it. and it's going to be a long road.
That's right. Yeah.
So
There is no such thing as an overnight success,
yeah,
right? Yeah. I mean, that is America's greatest fraud.
yeah, I think so too.
Right.
I think so too.
Right.
Um,
So
it's more fun to take the long road too.
say more about that.
It's just, I don't know. There's just more opportunity to learn about yourself.
Yeah. Meet people.
Meet people.
Yeah.
You know, play. Yeah. You know, dip your toes in all the things.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you know that one of my kind of side loves, one of my side hustles is puppetry.
Yes, I do.
Which is like, in some weird way, it is kind of a Meisner, right? There is something about puppetry that is very like, so like vivid and alive. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm grateful to have that side hustle, to you know what I mean? To have these other roads that I can.
Yeah. It feels
every once in a while, like, you know, go down that road and
it's like the almost taboo. It feels a little bit like what you were talking about earlier with the like, I did some of the weirdest theater of my life at that time in my life, right? I think that's sort of connected to it.
Oh yeah.
Because it's fringe for sure, puppetry. Especially when you see like, there's so many different versions of it, right? And so much like so much interesting stuff you can do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But the best puppetry again is alive and vivid and in the body and you know, radiates all those things that you know, we were talking about in regards to good acting.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, to make something else come alive.
Yes. Right?
That takes mastery.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so fun. Yeah.
So finally, I'm going to ask about, you know, because it came up a little bit earlier, the idea that people claim to be teaching a technique and they're really just either slapping somebody else's name on it and unrightfully licensing, you know, the goodwill that comes with that. You know, or they just have some misguided understanding of what it means to teach somebody's technique. How is it, you were talking a lot before with reverence, and I understand it because I've been your student, for Maggie.
Yeah.
What is it about what you took away from your time with her that makes you a purist? And how does that differ from what you understand of people who are misrepresenting or licensing, you know, a name?
Yeah, I think I told you that early on when I did start teaching the Meisner work. I went back to Maggie. I was like, okay, I want to do this. Is that okay? I started doing this and I really like it. Is that okay? Because I just, and it was why I hesitated to even start, because I just feel such, it's like my church, you know what I mean? It's like, I feel such reverence for it. I feel such a huge responsibility to hold it in a particular way. And that's the way that Maggie taught me.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's literally one step removed, right? She learned from Sandy.
She learned from William Esper.
Okay.
And then William Esper learned from Sandy.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and I always talk about that too. It's Sandy, William Esper, Maggie, me. And that's a lineage and an ancestry that I take super seriously. And it's getting emotional right now. Even thinking about it, it means something to me. It means something to me to hold those teachers in my windshield, right? And then Maggie especially. So I feel a great responsibility to teach it the way that it was taught to me. Right. Now, that being said, you know, I'm also an ever evolving human, and our world, since I first took the Meisner work, has changed, and how we, well, you know, that's how our conversation started, right? We were talking about neurological.
Right. Neurological sexiness versus
neurological
shame.
sexiness versus shame. Yeah. So we understand things differently now about the human brain and the human condition that we didn't before. And so I think I bring my age, my experience into my teaching the same way that Maggie did, right? There were ways that Maggie taught an activity, the expanded activity, that Bill did not. Right. And it's not that they're not teaching the same thing. She just talked about it differently.
Right.
So I know I have my own version of some of the things that Maggie taught me, right? But it still is rooted in what I learned from her. And like I said, I always come back to her. She is always in my windshield, even when I'm diverting just a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm like, how would Maggie feel about that? Right?
Yeah.
I don't think I am saying anything that would, is so far off the path. I think I'm now using my knowledge, my experience in teaching this technique, the world we live in now, what we know about the human brain now, where humanity is now. Of course, all of those things are filtering through how I now teach the work. But ultimately, yes. And you know that about me, and you and I have talked about this a lot. I'm not interested in taking the Meisner work and doing my own version of it.
Right.
That would not feel right to me. I do feel I do feel very strongly in honoring my ancestry, honoring where I came from. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something very important to me in that. So, and I don't know. I think that's important to you too.
Why did she say that?
Just based on our conversations and things I hear you saying as well.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
Yeah. I just found out I'm 12.6% Native American.
What?
Isn't that weird?
No way!
I think that's right. I think I have that number right. It could be more.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. My mom did a 23andMe. Yeah, I think that's right, because she was like 26%, and I was like, 12 or 16, somewhere in that range. And I was like, well, that explains some things, but also like, just kind of shocked. It's just not something I ever knew about my lineage. Yeah. But that it's funny how, like, when I learned that, I walked through the world differently. I just went, oh wait, like, that matters.
Yes. I think lineage matters.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does, because we're evolving.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to do that.
Yeah.
You add on all the trappings of a modern society, and there's things that happen that get really weird, and then we get neurodivergent, issues, I think, because of it, because it normally takes we're not adapting very well, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But that even only separated by, maybe a couple of millennia, it's less than that. Anybody who does 23andMe, right? You're not looking that far back to find those connections, and those things mean something. Right? They become the modern sort of understanding of evolution in the world. You can extrapolate, what that means, that it takes millennia for us to actually change, to actually evolve.
Yeah.
Right? For a mammal to have it from, having its nose in its front to its head so it can swim underwater, and, blah, blah, blah. It takes a long fucking time.
Yes. Right.
So I'm still that person, and somewhat that person, right? That whatever those lineages are. And I think, that there is something really important about the purity of having discovered something. I mean, I think Meisner downloaded something.
Yes, I think he did too.
It's unique.
I think he did too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you and I have talked about this too. There's something very Buddhist about the repetition, about just the whole idea of being present in the moment
Yeah.
with another human being, you know. He was really the first person in our world to really talk about that.
Yeah.
And then find an exercise that would embody that,
Yeah. Encourage it.
you know. Yeah. How the fuck did he do that?
Yeah.
Considering, you know, when he lived, like he was downloading something,
Yeah, I think so
you
too.
know,
Yeah.
he was tapped into something bigger.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why I think doing it can feel therapeutic,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which you talk about that in class often. Yeah.
Not therapy.
Therapeutic.
That can be therapeutic.
Right.
Yes. Sure.
What time do we got? Do you know? What did you notice what time we started? Well, I guess we should do. I was just worried about the light. All right, do you want to get started on the interview though?
Asshole.
We can stop.